Welcome to Not So Boring History. Tonight, as the world quiets down, let your mind drift back through time. Get comfortable, settle in, and let the noise of the day fade away. We're about to unfold a story, not just to learn, but to feel. Because history isn't boring, not when you listen closely.
Dust motes danced in the lone shaft of sunlight, slicing through the attic's gloom. Lily coughed, waving a hand in front of her face. The air hung thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten things. Cobwebs, like ghostly curtains, draped across furniture shrouded in white sheets. She'd promised her grandmother she'd sort through the attic, a task she'd been putting off for weeks. It wasn't just the dust and the spiders. It was the feeling of being surrounded by echoes of lives lived, secrets whispered, and then forgotten. She navigated around a towering stack of hat boxes, each tied with faded ribbons, and past a rocking horse with one eye missing. Curiosity, a constant companion, tugged her forward. What treasures, what mysteries lay hidden beneath these layers of time? In the far corner, beneath a sloping eave, sat an old trunk, its brass hinges green with verdigris. Lily knelt, her knees protesting the hard floorboards. The lock was broken, hanging open like a metal jaw. She lifted the heavy lid, releasing a musty odor that made her wrinkle her nose. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed lace and brittle photographs, was a book. It was unlike any she'd ever seen. The cover was made of dark, almost black, leather, intricately tooled with symbols she didn't recognize. They looked vaguely like birds and snakes, stylized in a way that hinted at something ancient and powerful. The title, embossed in faded gold lettering, was barely legible: The Land of the Pharaohs. Lily carefully lifted the book from the trunk. It was surprisingly heavy, the pages thick and yellowed, filled with dense text and elaborate illustrations. The paper felt strangely smooth, almost like vellum. As she turned the pages, images of towering pyramids, majestic temples, and pharaohs adorned with elaborate headdresses filled her vision. She saw scenes of everyday life: farmers tilling the fertile soil, artisans crafting intricate jewelry, scribes meticulously recording information on papyrus scrolls. She was captivated. History had always been her favorite subject, but this felt different, more immediate, more alive than anything she'd ever read in a textbook. It wasn't just dates and names. It was a window into a vibrant, complex world. She found a page depicting the city of Thebes, a sprawling metropolis on the banks of the Nile. The illustration showed towering obelisks, grand palaces, and bustling marketplaces. The detail was incredible. She could almost hear the sounds of the city, the chatter of merchants, the chanting of priests. Intrigued, Lily began to read the accompanying text. It was written in a formal, almost archaic style, filled with phrases she didn't understand. But as she continued, the words seemed to blur, the letters rearranging themselves in her mind. It was as if the book was speaking to her, bypassing her conscious thought and communicating directly with her soul. Suddenly, the book began to glow. A soft, warm light emanated from its pages, illuminating the attic in an ethereal glow. The symbols on the cover pulsed with an energy that seemed to vibrate through her fingertips. Lily gasped, dropping the book to the floor. The light intensified, filling the attic with an almost blinding brilliance. The air crackled with energy, making her hair stand on end. She felt a strange, tingling sensation all over her body, as if she were being pulled apart and put back together at the same time. Fear mixed with exhilaration. She wanted to run, to escape the strange power emanating from the book, but her feet seemed rooted to the floor. She was transfixed, unable to tear her gaze away from the glowing pages. The light swirled around her, forming a vortex of energy that sucked her into its center. The attic began to fade, the familiar shapes of furniture and forgotten objects dissolving into a swirling kaleidoscope of colors. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing herself for whatever was about to happen. Then silence. She slowly opened her eyes. The attic was gone. The musty smell of old wood had been replaced by the dry, hot scent of sand and spices. The soft glow of the book had been replaced by the harsh glare of the sun. She was standing in a bustling marketplace, surrounded by people dressed in strange clothes. Men in loincloths and women in flowing linen robes bartered for goods, their voices a cacophony of unfamiliar sounds. The air was thick with the smell of exotic fruits, roasted meats, and incense. Towering above the marketplace, she saw the city she had just been reading about, Thebes. The obelisks, the temples, the palaces, all were even more magnificent than she had imagined. The sheer scale of it all was overwhelming. Lily stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. This couldn't be real. It had to be a dream. A very vivid, very strange dream. But the heat on her skin, the smell of the air, the press of the crowd, all felt undeniably real. She reached out and touched a nearby stall, her fingers brushing against a pile of brightly colored fabrics. The texture was rough and coarse, not at all like the soft cotton she was used to. A woman with dark, kohl-rimmed eyes turned and stared at her, her expression a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. She spoke to Lily in a language she didn't understand, her voice sharp and questioning. Lily opened her mouth to reply, but no words came out. She was completely disoriented, utterly lost. She didn't know where she was, how she had gotten there, or what she was supposed to do. All she knew was that she was a long way from home, and she had a very bad feeling about what was to come. Panic began to set in. This wasn't just a dream. This was real. Somehow, impossibly, she had been transported to ancient Egypt, and she was completely unprepared for what awaited her. A world of strangers. The air hung thick and heavy, a cloying blend of roasted meat, unfamiliar spices, and something acrid that stung Lily's nostrils. Gone was the dusty, familiar scent of her grandmother's attic. In its place was a cacophony of smells that threatened to overwhelm her. The ground beneath her bare feet was rough, packed earth, a stark contrast to the worn wooden floorboards she remembered just moments before. Lily stumbled, her hand flying out to grasp something for support. Her fingers closed around rough-spun fabric. A startled yelp escaped the owner of the garment. A woman with skin the color of sun-baked clay and eyes lined with coal, so dark they seemed to swallow the light. The woman recoiled, muttering rapidly in a tongue Lily couldn't comprehend. Panic clawed at Lily's throat. Faces, a sea of unfamiliar faces, surrounded her. They were dark-skinned, adorned with strange jewelry and elaborate hairstyles. Men in kilts strode past, their bare chests gleaming with sweat. Women in long, flowing dresses carried baskets piled high with produce Lily couldn't identify. Children darted through the throng, their laughter sharp and foreign. The noise was deafening. The rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the bleating of goats tethered to wooden carts, the hawkers' cries, a chaotic symphony of sounds that bounced off the mud-brick buildings lining the marketplace. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the sensory overload. It was no use. The sounds, the smells, the sheer press of bodies against her were relentless. She opened her eyes, her gaze darting around frantically, searching for something, anything familiar. A sign, a face, anything to anchor her to reality. But there was nothing, only the alien landscape of ancient Thebes. Lily took a shaky step backwards, bumping into a stack of clay pots. They wobbled precariously, threatening to topple. A burly man with a shaved head and a thick gold bracelet glared at her. He barked something in that strange language, his face contorted with anger. I don't understand, Lily stammered, her voice barely a whisper above the din. She tried a different approach. English? Do you speak English? The man's glare intensified. He pointed at the pots, then at Lily, and began shouting louder, gesturing wildly. Other people stopped to stare, their faces a mixture of curiosity and annoyance. Lily felt her cheeks flush with shame and fear. She was drawing attention to herself, making a scene. She tried to piece together what the man was saying, focusing on his gestures. He clearly wanted her to pay for the pots, or at least for the ones she'd nearly knocked over. But she had nothing. No money, no possessions, nothing but the clothes on her back and the book that had brought her here. The book. It was still clutched tightly in her hand. The land of the Pharaohs. Could it take her back? Was it a portal, a key to another time? The thought gave her a sliver of hope. But how to use it? She flipped through the brittle pages, her fingers trembling. The hieroglyphs swam before her eyes, indecipherable symbols that offered no clue. She desperately searched for a familiar image, a word, anything that might trigger another transfer. A small boy, no older than 7, with mischievous eyes and a gap-toothed grin, approached her cautiously. He tugged at her skirt, pointing at the book. He spoke slowly, enunciating each syllable with care. Hooray! Lily frowned. The word sounded vaguely familiar. She remembered reading something about it in the book. Pharaoh, she questioned tentatively, trying out the sound. The boy's face lit up. He nodded enthusiastically, pointing at the book again, then at the sky. He chattered excitedly, mixing gestures with words Lily couldn't understand. But his meaning was clear. The book was connected to the pharaoh. Could it be that simple? Was the book somehow tied to the ruling power of this time? It seemed a long shot, but it was the only lead she had. Lily looked around the marketplace, her eyes scanning the crowd. Where would she even begin to look for the pharaoh? The palace, presumably, but where was it? And how would she, a strange, foreign girl with no knowledge of the language or customs, ever hope to gain access? The task seemed impossible, a fool's errand. But she had no other choice. She was stranded, alone, and utterly dependent on the slim hope that this ancient book could somehow bring her home. She had to find a pharaoh, bread and emmer wheat. The market assaulted her senses. Baskets overflowed with dates, figs, and pomegranates. Squawking chickens dodged the feet of hurrying merchants. The air, thick with dust and the scent of spices she couldn't name, scratched at the back of her throat. She spotted a stall piled high with bright red apples, a familiar sight in this alien world. Hope flickered. At least she recognized something. Lily approached the stall cautiously, the book clutched tightly to her chest. The vendor, a stout woman with a severe expression and arms like tree trunks, watched her with open suspicion. Lily pointed to an apple, then held out her hand, palm up, a universal gesture for how much? The woman grunted, then held up 3 fingers. 3 what? Lily rummaged in her pockets. All she had were modern coins, useless here. She pulled out a $5 bill, smooth and crisp, and offered it to the woman. The vendor recoiled as if Lily had presented her with a venomous snake. She spat on the ground, muttering something in rapid-fire Egyptian that sounded distinctly unfriendly. Other shoppers turned to stare, their faces a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Lily's cheeks burned. She was clearly doing something terribly wrong. She tried again, pointing at the apple, then at herself, then miming eating it. The woman remained unmoved, her eyes narrowed. A small crowd was beginning to gather, their whispers like a swarm of angry bees. Panic clawed at Lily's throat. She was stranded, hungry, and apparently incapable of buying a simple piece of fruit. Suddenly, a voice cut through the rising tide of noise. "Leave her be, Heta fears. She clearly doesn't understand our ways." A man stepped forward, his face lined with the weariness of hard work, but his eyes crinkling at the corners with a gentle kindness. He wore a simple linen kilt, dusted with flour, and his hands were calloused and strong. A baker, perhaps? Heta fears, the apple vendor, glared at him. "She offers paper for good food, Kemeni. Is she mad?" Kemeni chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound. Perhaps merely lost. He turned to Lily, his gaze steady and reassuring. "Welcome, stranger. You are in Thebes. I am Kemeni, the baker." He gestured to a nearby stall, smaller and less crowded than Hedifir's overflowing display. It held rows of golden brown loaves, their crusts glistening. The aroma of freshly baked bread filled the air, a welcome contrast to the overwhelming smells of the market. Lily swallowed, her stomach rumbling loudly. I don't have any money," she stammered, feeling utterly foolish. Kemeni smiled. "I see that. Tell you what, you look hungry. Have some bread. On the house." He reached behind the stall and pulled out a small, round loaf, still warm from the oven. He broke it in half and offered her the larger piece. Lily hesitated, then accepted it gratefully. The bread was coarse and dense, with a nutty, earthy flavor she couldn't quite place. It wasn't the soft, fluffy white bread she was used to, but it was delicious. She devoured it in a few bites, the simple act of eating calming her frayed nerves. Emmer wheat, Kemeni said, watching her with amusement. The best grain for bread. Grows well along the river. Makes a strong loaf, good for travelers. He gestured towards the Nile, a shimmering ribbon in the distance. Lily nodded, still chewing. It's good, she managed to say, her mouth full. Good enough to help you find your way. Kemeni asked, his eyes twinkling. You seem out of place. Not from around here, are you? Lily hesitated. How much could she tell him? Could she trust him? He seemed kind, but this was still ancient Egypt. She decided to be cautious. I am far from home, she said vaguely. I need to find a pharaoh. She clutched the book tighter, as if it held the answer to all her problems. Kemeni raised an eyebrow. The pharaoh? That is a lofty goal. What business do you have with him? I think this book can help me, Lily said, holding it out slightly. A boy recognized a word from it. He said it meant pharaoh. Kemeni studied the book with curiosity, his brow furrowed. He reached out and gently touched the cover, his fingers tracing the strange symbols. I cannot read these markings, he admitted, but I know enough to see this is no ordinary scroll. Be careful, stranger. The pharaoh is not easily reached, and some knowledge is best left buried. He paused, then smiled again, his weariness momentarily forgotten. But first, you need more bread, and perhaps some water. Come, sit, tell me your story, or at least as much as you dare. He gestured to a small stool behind his stall. Lily, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time since arriving in this strange and terrifying land, sat down. The bread had warmed her from the inside out, and Kemeni's kindness was a balm to her panicked soul. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone. The Nile's revenge. The bread Kemeni offered felt rough, almost gravelly on her tongue, yet Lily devoured it. The last time she'd eaten felt like a lifetime ago, the memory blurred by the bizarre elasticity of time in this sun-drenched land. Hunger gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the baker's cryptic warning about the pharaoh, his words a puzzle. Protection, or a cautionary signpost pointing away from some forbidden path. Her book, a weighty presence in her satchel, threatened to pull her earthward. She drifted from the stall, the press of the crowd easing as she neared the river. The Nile. Books and pictures hadn't captured its immensity. It sprawled before her, a vibrant emerald ribbon shimmering under the pitiless sun. Reeds whispered along the banks, their shadows playing across the surface. A parched sensation gripped her. The bread, though welcome, had only intensified her dehydration. She scanned the throng, but no one hawked water. The market displayed mainly food and crafts, and besides, she possessed no currency that would hold value here. The Nile beckoned, cool and inviting. Surely a small amount couldn't hurt? Common sense sparred with dire need. She knew the risks of untreated water, a textbook lesson screaming in her head. Yet the sun blazed, the air shimmered with oppressive heat, and her body cried out for release. She reasoned that countless generations had relied on the Nile. How hazardous could it truly be? Ignoring that inner voice of doubt, Lily knelt, cupping her hands to capture the liquid. It tasted earthy with a hint of silt, but not entirely disagreeable. She drank deeply, relief flooding her parched throat. Again and again she drank, until her stomach felt comfortably distended. Brief respite allowed her to forget the strangeness of her circumstances, the appraising gazes, the incredible reality of finding herself stranded in ancient Egypt. She stood, dusting off her jeans. The sun's glare seemed less severe, the air less oppressive. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could navigate this. The first pang struck minutes later, a keen stab in her lower abdomen. She dismissed it, blaming hunger or the unfamiliar fare. But the discomfort escalated, twisting into a nauseating knot. Doubled over, she clutched her stomach. The world tilted and blurred. She stumbled away from the river's edge, desperately seeking shade, solace. The market, so lively moments before, now morphed into a suffocating labyrinth. Faces swam in a sea of critical observation. She located a less congested spot beneath the canvas of a pottery vendor stall. The potter, a weathered man with compassionate eyes, observed her with concern. He remained silent, but his gaze offered empathy. Lily crumpled to the ground, her body seized with torment. Her stomach lurched violently, ville rising in her throat. She barely managed to reach behind the stall before she vomited, a gush of foul-tasting water and partially digested bread. The potter recoiled slightly, but didn't turn away. Exhausted, she lay panting on the ground, weak and trembling. The sharp pain had lessened slightly, but she felt utterly depleted. The potter offered her a clay cup filled with water. Lily hesitated, battling fear and thirst. "The Nile," she croaked, her voice raspy. He shook his head, indicating a large earthenware jar in the corner. He pantomimed filtering water through a piece of fabric. "Well, water. Pure." Lily accepted the cup gratefully, sipping slowly, cautiously. The water tasted clean and refreshing, a world apart from the muddy Nile. When she finished, he pointed to her stomach and made a swirling motion with his hand. Then he pointed to the Nile and shook his head emphatically. She understood. The Nile, not the benevolent source she'd envisioned, but a hotbed for parasites, a conduit for disease. A beautiful, deadly deception. Careless, foolish. She had allowed thirst to conquer reason. "The Nile claims its due," she murmured, the potter acknowledging her words with a nod. "Its retribution is swift. Leeches and ancient medicine." Nebi, the potter, ushered Lily into his humble dwelling, a clay-baked sanctuary redolent of earthen craft and hearth fires. Each spasm brought fresh agony, a white-hot poker twisting in her gut. She sought refuge on a scratchy woven mat, its rough texture grating against her fever-ridden flesh. Tauret, Nebi's wife, a woman radiating quiet fortitude and compassion through her gaze, offered cool well water. Lily, wary now, took small sips, the pure taste a welcome reprieve from the river's foul brew. Gratitude choked her, the words dying in the face of the unrelenting pain. "He comes shortly," Tauret murmured, her voice a soothing balm. "Who?" Lily rasped. "The healer." Nebi sent word. Lily's eyes widened in surprise. A healer? It hadn't occurred to her that the ancients possessed such expertise. What remedies awaited her? Visions swam in her mind, crude instruments, barbaric interventions. A wave of dread crashed over her, momentarily eclipsing the throbbing ache. Soon after, a man of presence filled the small doorway, instantly commanding respect. Aged etched deep lines onto his face, a roadmap of countless experiences, and he bore a pouch filled with what she presumed were his instruments. Though clad in a simple white linen kilt, an air of quiet authority emanated from him, causing even Nebi and Tauret to appear slightly deferential. He addressed them in rapid-fire Egyptian, too swift for her comprehension, his sharp gaze flitting over her prone figure. Kneeling, his touch was surprisingly delicate as he palpated her abdomen. Each probe ignited a fresh cry of pain. He emanated the sense of dried herbs and something faintly metallic, an unsettling bouquet. "The river," he declared at last, his accent thick, yet understandable. She imbibed from the Nile. Nebi and Tauret exchanged worried glances. The healer unfastened his bag, revealing a curious assortment of items. Miniature terracotta vessels brimming with powders, desiccated leaves, and what looked like papyrus scrolls covered in intricate hieroglyphs. Selecting a specific jar, he blended a dark, pungent paste with Tourette's water. "Drink," he commanded gently, holding the concoction to Lily's lips. She recoiled instinctively, the aroma alone threatening to upend her stomach. "What is it?" she questioned, her voice quavering. "Herbs," he replied firmly. "To purge the impurity." Lily hesitated, suspicion clouding her judgment. This could be anything, poison for all she knew. But the agony was escalating, driving her to desperation. She braved a tentative sip. The taste was acrid, loamy, and intensely disagreeable. She forced it down, fighting the urge to vomit. Next, he indicated her arm. The blood, the humors are unbalanced. We must draw some. Lily frowned, confusion knitting her brow. Draw blood? What? He presented a small bowl, then pointed to a jar containing small, wriggling forms. Lily's stomach lurched violently. Leeches. Swollen, glistening parasites. Leeches? She croaked, horror seizing her. You intend to apply leeches to me? The healer nodded, unfazed by her evident disgust. They will extract the tainted blood. Restore equilibrium. No, Lily shrieked, scrambling backward against the wall in abject terror. Absolutely not. I refuse to allow those creatures near me. Nebi and Tauret watched her with growing consternation. The healer sighed, a flicker of impatience crossing his weathered features. It is the accepted practice, he insisted, his voice hardening. It will assist you. The river sickened you. This will provide restoration. Lily stared at the leeches, their segmented bodies writhing within their glass confines. The prospect of those parasites attaching themselves to her skin, engorging themselves with her blood, it was repulsive, utterly terrifying. Intellectually, she knew that leeches held a place in modern medicine. Yet this felt different. Primal, archaic. Surely there's another recourse. She pleaded, tears brimming in her eyes. I beg you, is there nothing else you can do? The healer regarded her with a mixture of pity and frustration. His confidence in his methods was unwavering, and her repudiation challenged his very authority. He addressed Nebi and Tauret once more, his tone low and insistent. The words were lost on Lily, but the meaning resonated loud and clear. They were trying to persuade her, to coerce her. The fear intensified, morphing into a chilling, desperate panic. She was trapped in the throes of illness, surrounded by individuals intent on subjecting her to a medical procedure she found profoundly abhorrent. The ancient world was proving to be far more harrowing, far more brutal than any nightmare she could have conjured. Sun and sand. The fever raged, a crucible where Lily's blood turned to liquid fire. Nebi's mud-brick dwelling offered scant relief. Inside, the air hung heavy, a stifling shroud redolent of dust, sun-baked herbs, and an indefinable antiquity. She lay upon a coarse mat, the fibers a torment against her skin, each nerve a raw protest. The sun, a pitiless glare in the heavens, hammered the roof, its heat leaching through the very clay. Despite the sliver of shadow cast by the shuttered window, the room radiated like a kiln. Lily writhed, the thin cotton of her dress plastered to her clammy form. Hours before, she had stubbornly refused the healer's remedies once more. The vision of the leeches, those writhing horrors in the clay pot, still plagued her mind. Nebi and Imani exchanged worried looks, their faces lined with apprehension. Still, Lily had stood firm, clinging to her faith in modern medicine, even as her body faltered. Now, defiance seemed a foolish pride. Each breath scraped her throat, offering only a fleeting comfort. Her head pounded and her vision blurred. Beyond the small window, the world wavered, a shimmering illusion of coolness she knew to be false. Water, she rasped throat raw. Imani, moving with a quiet grace, presented her with a clay cup. The water, tepid and earthy, was nonetheless welcome, its touch bringing a moment's ease. The sun, it's oppressive, Lily whispered, pushing the cup aside. Imani nodded, dark eyes reflecting understanding. R.A. blesses us all, child. He is a potent force, and his light demands respect. Lily watched as Imani adjusted the shutter, further diminishing the blade of sunlight. She noticed the careful artistry in the woven palm fronds of the shutter, each fiber positioned to deflect the harshest glare. It was more than a mere shield. It was a careful pact with the day. As the sun ascended further, Lily grew increasingly aware of the house's deliberate design. The thick, earthen walls, the diminutive windows, the elevated ceiling. Everything seemed crafted to buffer the sun's relentless assault. Even the house's position, sheltered against a larger structure, offered sanctuary during the peak heat. She turned her gaze to the doorway, where Nebi sat patiently plaiting reeds. He wore a simple linen kilt and a headcloth that shielded his head and neck from the sun's intensity. Lily recalled seeing other Egyptians similarly attired, men in broad-brimmed straw hats, women in draped shawls that veiled their heads and shoulders. This wasn't about mere custom, it was about self-preservation. A young child, perhaps 5 summers old, peered into the room, his eyes wide with curiosity. He sported a miniature version of Nebi's kilt and a small amulet around his throat. Imani gently ushered him away, but Lily caught a glimpse of his face, bronzed and vital, despite the harsh environment. Lily attempted to rise, but a dizzy spell forced her back. She watched the shadows stretch and crawl across the floor, marking the sun's slow journey. The sun, an unwavering sentinel, dictated the very pulse of life in this ancient world. It was a force to be reckoned with, a power capable of both nurturing and destroying. She considered her life back home, the refuge of air conditioning, the ease of sunscreen, the fashionable adornment of sunglasses and hats. Here, these were not luxuries, they were vital tools. Shade, once taken for granted, now held an unmatched preciousness. Its cool embrace yearned for with every fiber of her being. As the afternoon waned, the fever began to loosen its grip, leaving her drained yet more coherent. She understood that she could not continue to resist the wisdom and customs of this land. To survive, she must learn from those who had flourished here for millennia. Perhaps, she thought with a reluctant yielding, that acrid herbal potion wasn't so terrible after all. Perhaps she needed to trust that Nebi and Imani knew what was best, even if it meant accepting practices that seemed strange and archaic. The sun continued its barrage, an ever-present reminder of her fragility and her desperate need to adapt. The taste of earth and the vision of leeches started to seem like a trifling price to pay for a chance at life. Laws and order. The day dawned thick with humidity, a damp blanket clinging to Lily's skin even through the thin linen shift Nebi had given her. Her fever had retreated, leaving her weak and shaky, but blessedly lucid. She sat propped against the mud brick wall, watching Imani grind herbs with a stone mortar and pestle. The air, thick with the scent of mint and something vaguely medicinal, was a far cry from the sterile antiseptic smell of a modern hospital. "Drink this," Imani instructed, offering a dark green concoction in a small clay cup. Lily eyed it suspiciously. "What is it?" "It will help you regain your strength. Mostly mint, some willow bark for the aches, and a touch of honey." Reluctantly, Lily took a small sip. It was bitter, but not entirely unpleasant. She downed the rest in one gulp. Nebi returned from the market, his face etched with worry. "You should not be outside, Lily. You're still weak." "I needed air," she said, her voice raspy, "and I was tired of staring at the walls." Suddenly, a commotion erupted in the street. Shouts and angry cries pierced the morning air, followed by the unmistakable thud of fists hitting flesh. Nebi stiffened. "Stay here," he ordered, but Lily, consumed by a morbid curiosity, followed him to the doorway. A brawl had broken out between 2 men, seemingly over a spilled cart of dates. One, a wiry man with a shaved head, was pummeling the other, a larger man with a thick beard, who was now sprawling on the ground, blood trickling from his nose. A small crowd had gathered, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. No one intervened. "Stop!" Lily cried, instinctively stepping forward. Nebi grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "Do not interfere, Lily. It is not our place." Before Lily could protest, 2 guards, clad in simple linen kilts and armed with batons, pushed their way through the crowd. They didn't speak, but their presence was enough to silence the onlookers. The wiry man, seeing them, froze, his fist raised mid-air. The guards dragged both men to their feet, their faces grim. They didn't ask questions, didn't listen to the frantic explanations the men offered. Instead, They bound their hands tightly behind their backs with coarse rope. "Where are you taking them?" Lily asked Nebi, her voice hushed. "To the magistrate," he replied, his eyes fixed on the scene. "They will be judged." The guards shoved the prisoners forward, the small crowd parting to let them pass. Lily watched them go, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. "What will happen to them?" she asked, turning to Nebi. Nebi sighed. "It depends on a magistrate's judgment. Fighting in the streets is a serious offense. It disturbs the peace, disrupts trade. They could be fined, flogged, or even sentenced to hard labor." "Flogged," Lily repeated, her voice barely a whisper. The casual brutality of it shocked her. "The law is harsh here, Lily. It must be. Without it, there would be chaos." Amani, who had joined them at the doorway, nodded in agreement. "The goddess Ma'at demands order. Without order, there is only Isfit, chaos, and destruction." Lily looked from Nebi to Imani, their faces serious, their belief in the necessity of law absolute. She thought of the relative freedom she had taken for granted back home, the endless debates about rights and freedoms. Here, survival seemed to depend on strict adherence to the rules, no matter how harsh they seemed. That night, as she lay on her thin straw pallet, Lily couldn't shake the image of the two men being dragged away. The swiftness and certainty of the punishment were unsettling. She understood, intellectually, the need for order in a society, especially one as vast and complex as ancient Egypt. But the idea of being subjected to such arbitrary justice filled her with a deep unease. She knew she had to be more careful, more observant. One wrong step, one impulsive act, could have dire consequences. She was a stranger in a strange land, and the laws here were not the laws she knew. She had to learn them, understand them, and above all, respect them, if she hoped to survive long enough to find a way home. The book, the pharaoh, the escape, all seemed infinitely more distant now, overshadowed by the immediate and pressing need to navigate this dangerous world. Games and dust. The sun's intensity pressed down, a heavy blanket on Lily's lingering weakness. Driven by a persistent restlessness that defied her recent fever, she ventured further from the shaded haven of Tia's home than she had in days. The lane, usually a vibrant pulse of daily commerce, lay hushed beneath the afternoon glare. A knot of children, barely past toddlerhood, clustered near a crumbling wall, faces alight with concentration. Lily paused, captivated by their single-minded focus. A game occupied them, pebbles scattered within a drawn circle, accompanied by a rapid-fire chant she couldn't decipher. An impulse drew her closer. "Hello," she offered, her voice still rasping. The game ceased. 6 pairs of eyes fixed on her, a blend of suspicion and youthful curiosity. A diminutive girl, fiery determination blazing in her dark irises, stepped forward. It was Tia. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice surprisingly firm for one so small. "I'm Lily," she stammered, feeling oddly exposed. "Just watching your game. It looks absorbing." Tia scrutinized her. "You're staying with old Nocti?" A nod. "She's been kind enough to take me in." A fleeting expression, perhaps understanding, possibly pity, flickered across Tia's face. She gestured to the ground. "Senate," she declared, her initial guardedness softening. "Want to try?" Hope sparked in Lily's chest. A game, a touch of normalcy, of the familiar. "I'd love to, but I don't know how." A gap-toothed grin split Tia's face. "I can teach you." The game proved deceptively intricate. Knuckle bones served as dice, dictating the movement of pebbles across the grid. A contest of strategic blocking and a race to the finish. Lily's fingers fumbled, her confusion drawing playful taunts from the others. Only Tia remained patient, her explanations surprisingly articulate. But her strength was ebbing. Her mind struggled to unravel the game's subtleties. The heat intensified, causing her head to swim. The fine dust stirred by the children's movements rasped at her throat. After several clumsy turns, she conceded, "I'm sorry. I'm just not very good at this." Abruptly, the wind howled, slashing at their faces with stinging sand. The sky, moments before a flawless cerulean, transformed into a bruised, ominous orange. The children cried out, their eyes wide with instinctive fear. Sandstorm, Tia screamed, seizing Lily's hand. We have to find shelter. The others vanished, scattering towards doorways and shadowed alleys. Tia propelled Lily forward, her small hand a surprising anchor. The wind intensified, a banshee whale carrying a swirling cyclone of sand that reduced visibility to near zero. Lily choked, struggling to draw breath as the gritty particles invaded her lungs. Tia wrestled her toward a modest, dwelling wedge between two taller buildings. With a grunt, she shoved open the wooden door and dragged Lily inside. The abrupt shift from the raging tempest to the dim, still interior left her disoriented. The single room was sparsely appointed. A low table occupied the center, circled by woven mats. In a corner, a woman ground grain with a mortar and pestle. A boy, perhaps 2 years older than Tia, sat hunched over papyrus, painstakingly copying hieroglyphs. Tia's mother, Lily realized, and her brother. The woman glanced up, her expression a mix of startled surprise and concern. She wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron. Tia, what's happening? A sandstorm, mother. Tia gasped. I brought her in. She's the stranger staying with Nocti. The woman's gaze shifted, assessing Lily with a careful look. Her expression softened slightly, though she didn't smile. You are welcome here, she murmured, her voice weary. Neferkeper, secure the shutters. The boy, Neferkeper, looked up, his dark eyes narrowing with a hint of resentment. Clearly, the interruption irked him. With a resentful slam, he bolted the shutters, deepening the room's gloom. Lily felt like an intruder, a disruption. The air hung thick with the scent of dust and ground grain. The only sounds were the storm's furious roar and the rhythmic grind of the pestle. Trapped, she felt, not just by the swirling sands, but by the delicate balance of their lives. Watching Neferkeper return to his papyrus, his brow furrowed in concentration, a pang of guilt shot through her. She was disturbing their routine, their quiet, carefully ordered existence. Sensing her discomfort, Tia tugged her sleeve. Sit, she urged, indicating a mat. It will pass. Lily lowered herself, feeling the lingering grit beneath her. She studied Tia's mother, Neferkeper, the unadorned simplicity of their surroundings. This was their reality, their world, and for the moment, hers as well. The book, the escape it promised, seemed impossibly distant, lost in the sandstorm's fury and the watchful eyes of her reluctant hosts. The gale continued its onslaught, a visceral reminder of the land's untamed power and the precariousness of her own place within it. Life in a crowded home. The tempest howled, a furious beast clawing at the mud brick walls. Yet within, a different tension coiled around Lily. It wasn't a clamorous affair, but a subtle disquiet that shadowed her every breath. The single room, a humble sanctuary built from the earth itself, seemed to shrink with each tick of time. Nefertari, Tia's mother, moved with an ingrained economy of motion, smoothing the bedding in the corner, adjusting the woven baskets that adorned the walls. Each action was honed, precise. Lily noticed the avoidance in her dark eyes, the way Nefertari's gaze skirted past her. Little Hori, roused from his slumber by the storm's arrival, clung to his mother's skirts, his large eyes fixed warily on the newcomer. The air tasted of wood smoke from the small clay oven, mingled with the river's breath. Lily coughed, grit irritating her parched throat, a stark reminder of the inhospitable world outside. Guilt pricked at her. She was only worsening the close atmosphere. I could help. Lily croaked, her voice still rough. Is there something I can do? At last. Nefertari's gaze met hers, her expression an unreadable mask. You are still fragile. Rest. Lily conceded. Instead, she watched Nefertari wield a bundle of reeds, sweeping the earthen floor with deft strokes, banishing dust towards the threshold. The packed earth, polished smooth by generations, still bore a fine film of desert residue. A never-ending struggle, Lily surmised, this battle against the encroaching sands. Sensing Lily's discomfort, Tia tugged at her sleeve. "Come," she invited, pulling her towards a corner. "I'll show you my treasures." Tia's treasures consisted of a handful of roughly hewn wooden figurines and a collection of water-worn stones. She arranged them on a worn mat with painstaking care, her small brow furrowed. Lily knelt beside her, feigning enthusiasm, but her thoughts were a whirlwind. She felt keenly aware of the family's strained courtesy, the unspoken question hanging heavy in the air. When will she depart? A sharp gasp escaped Nefertari's lips. The reeds fell from her grasp. "A scorpion!" she exclaimed, pointing to the wall. Lily's pulse leaped. She recoiled, her gaze frantically searching. There, clinging to the adobe wall, a small, ebony scorpion, its barbed tail curved menacingly over its back. With a swift, decisive motion, Nefertari seized a heavy clay pot and hurled it, shattering the vessel and crushing the creature beneath. Hori dissolved into tears, burying his face in the folds of his mother's garment. Tia, however, remained unfazed. "They come inside sometimes, especially when the rain comes," she explained matter-of-factly, as Nefertari swept up the shards of pottery and the scorpion's remains. "We must be careful." Lily swallowed hard. The image of the arachnid seared into her memory. Danger wasn't confined to the wilderness. It lurked within these very walls. "And snakes," Tia added, as if divining her unspoken fears. "Sometimes snakes come inside. My father killed a cobra in here last summer. It was hidden beneath the sleeping mat." Lily's gaze locked onto the woven mat, a shiver tracing her spine. She could almost conjure the image of the serpent, coiled, poised to strike. This wasn't merely a dwelling. It was a theater of survival, a constant negotiation with the harsh realities of their existence. Nefertari, having cleared the debris, turned to Lily, her features softening, a flicker of compassion in her gaze. "The desert is unforgiving," she murmured, her voice a low thrum. "Vigilance is our constant companion." Understanding dawned. Lily had been so consumed by her own unease, her own yearning for escape, that she had failed to grasp the daily battles of these resilient people. Their lives were an endless dance with peril, a precarious balance between endurance and tribulation. As the storm's fury began to wane, Lily understood that her own internal turmoil was far from over. She had been thrust into a realm where survival was not a given, where even the simplest comforts were hard-won victories. She was no longer merely a stranded traveler, but an interloper, disturbing the delicate equilibrium of their lives. And she had a profound education ahead of her. Gods and cats. The storm's departure unveiled a world cleansed and gleaming, its beauty delicate and transient. The air, thick with lingering dampness, bore the tang of damp earth mingling with a sweet, elusive floral scent Lily couldn't quite identify. Drawn by a resonating drone that vibrated deep within her, she followed the sound of voices intoning a prayer, heading towards the village's core. A small, sun-baked plaza hosted a gathering. In the center stood a rough-hewn altar of stacked stones, adorned with vibrant cloths. Before it, Anubis, a priest with a close-cropped head and intense, obsidian eyes, stood with uplifted hands. A pristine white linen robe, incongruous against the dusty ground, draped his frame, and a weighty gold torque encircled his neck. The villagers, more plainly attired, knelt reverently, faces tilted towards the revitalizing sun. Lily observed from the plaza's edge, feeling like an unwelcome specter. The guilt for her previous self-absorption stung. Lost in her own plight, consumed by a yearning for escape, she had remained blind to the real lives of these people, their trials, their faith. The chanting swelled, punctuated by the steady thrum of a drum. Anubis began to speak, his voice amplified by the open space. Though the words were foreign, the meaning resonated: reverence, fervor, supplication. He gestured skyward towards the ascending sun, then earthward, invoking the deities above and below. As the ritual proceeded, a lithe, ebony feline wove through the throng. It moved with aristocratic grace, its tail erect, golden eyes glinting in the sun's rays. The villagers respectfully made way, offering small bows. Lily knew instinctively this was no ordinary creature, but a sacred animal, a manifestation of Batet. Drawn by the ceremony's energy, the cat approached the altar, rubbing against Anubis's legs with a rumbling purr. The priest paused, offering a brief caress behind its ears. Wanting to demonstrate respect, Lily reached out as the cat passed. It had been an age since she'd been near an animal. Impatient in her eagerness, she underestimated the distance. Her fingers brushed the tip of the cat's tail, startling it. It hissed, its spine arching into a rigid curve, and spat before vanishing into the crowd. A collective intake of breath silenced the plaza. The chanting ceased. Every eye swiveled to Lily. Anubis's features hardened, his usual serenity dissolving into a scowl. Tension hung thick in the air. He descended from the altar, his movements precise and measured. He approached Lily, his gaze unflinching. "Do you comprehend what you've done?" he demanded, his voice laced with menace. Mortified, Lily stammered, I didn't mean to. I just wanted to pet it." Anubis' nostrils flared. "This is not some common animal. It is a sacred cat, blessed by Batet herself. Your disrespect is an affront to our gods." "I didn't realize," Lily pleaded. "I am sorry." "Ignorance provides no refuge," Anubis countered. "You are a guest here, yet you display no reverence for our ways, our beliefs. Do you believe the gods will countenance such disrespect?" He paused, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Do you even understand who Batet is?" Lily shook her head, overwhelmed by shame. Anubis released a sigh, laden with resignation. "Batet is the guardian of hearth and home, the deity of fertility and birth. She is celebrated for her elegance, her shrewdness, and her fierce protectiveness. To violate her sacred animal is to call down her fury." He indicated the retreating cat. "That creature is more than mere fur and bone. It is a conduit to the divine, a living symbol of all we hold inviolable." Softening his tone slightly, he added, "You hail from another world, shaped by different customs. I acknowledge your unfamiliarity with our traditions. But you must learn. Revere our gods, our customs, our ancient ways, or you will never find welcome here." He turned and returned to the altar, leaving Lily standing alone in the parched square, crushed by the weight of her blunder. The chanting gradually resumed, but the ceremony's earlier joy had evaporated, replaced by a palpable disquiet. No longer just an outsider, Lily had become a transgressor, a profaner of the sacred. A cold dread settled within her, a certainty of the arduous path ahead if she ever hoped to gain the gods' forgiveness and the trust of this ancient land. Tombs and Thebes. Anubis's decree landed like a physical blow. The air, thick moments before with pre-storm humidity, thrummed with a silence Lily felt as crushing condemnation. Every villager's stare was a tangible accusation, burning into her. She yearned to vanish, to become one with the dunes. Days dissolved into a blurry, isolating routine. The villagers, once tentatively friendly, now looked through her. Her attempts at conversation met polite but impenetrable walls. Even little Nefer, so eager to show her the riverbank, darted away at her approach. Shame settled in her gut, a cold not a consequence. One broiling afternoon, desperate for insight, Lily sought out the field workers on the village edge, hoping their distance from the temple might loosen tongues. She found them resting in the shadow of a wide-branched acacia, their skin gleaming under the sun. She approached tentatively, keeping her distance. Conversation ceased as wary eyes met hers. She was about to retreat when a snatch of dialogue caught her. "The jackals have been at it again," one man said, his face creased with worry. "The necropolis is too vast," another sighed, spitting. "The Medjay do their best, but they can't watch everything." "What do they take this time?" a third asked, resignation heavy in his tone. The first man exhaled. Just grave goods, they say. Food, linen, the usual. But they broke the sarcophagus, hunting for jewels. A pang struck Lily's heart. Tomb robbery. She knew the concept. Documentaries, articles. But to hear it spoken of as a real, present danger sent a chill snaking down her spine, despite the scorching heat. They fear nothing, the second man muttered darkly. Not even the curses. Curses are for simpletons. The third scoffed, though a flicker of disquiet betrayed him. It's the gold they want. A chance to live like pharaohs, if only for a day. The conversation drifted to speculation about the thieves and the inadequacy of the watch. Lily, unseen, stood motionless, weaving their words together. It wasn't simple larceny. It was sacrilege, a violation of the sacred slumber of the deceased. Suddenly, the Egyptians' meticulous care for their dead, the elaborate rituals, the opulent tombs, snapped into focus. It transcended mere vanity or religious fervor. It was about safeguarding loved ones from those scavengers who preyed on the departed. It was about ensuring their journey to the next world. Lily pictured her own grandmother, her ashes scattered in the rose garden at home. The thought of someone desecrating that place, rifling through her possessions with callous hands, ignited a fierce, protective anger within her. With stark clarity, she grasped the intensity of the Egyptians' abhorrence for tomb raiding. The weight of her own actions pressed down, heavier now. How quick she'd been to criticize their customs, to dismiss their beliefs. Now, she glimpsed their world, a world where death was not an ending, but a passage, where the deceased were not forgotten, but venerated and guarded. The sun began its descent, stretching long shadows across the fields. The laborers began collecting their tools, preparing for their return. Lily, a newfound sense of purpose stirring within her, slowly turned back towards the village. There was much to learn, much to redeem. But now, a sliver of understanding illuminated the vast cultural gulf. She was more than just a stranger. She was a violator, a defiler of holy ground. And she needed to find a path to atonement. The scribe's secret. The sun hammered the mud brick walls of her hovel, baking the air into a heavy, unmoving mass. Lily waved a frayed piece of papyrus, its smiling sphinx a cruel jest. Home! The word resonated, an empty echo that intensified with each sweltering sunrise. She yearned for rain-slicked pavement, the city's jarring symphony, even the sterile predictability of supermarket shelves. Anything but this self-imposed desert exile. She was tainted. Anubis's judgment weighed on her, a burden far heavier than the relentless heat. Faces averted as she neared. Murmurs trailed her like desert vipers. Even the children, once bright with curiosity, now scattered before her. Despair threatened to drown her. Arrogant and naive, she had barged into their world, disrupting its delicate equilibrium. Now, she was paying a bitter price. Yet, amidst the wallowing, a spark of resolve ignited. She refused to break. She couldn't. There had to be a path forward, a way to mend what she had broken, a chance for redemption. Her gaze swept the barren room, pausing on the woven mat that served as her bed. Concealed beneath, there were the few tokens salvaged from wherever she had originated. A dulled silver locket, a polished river stone, and a nearly empty tube of lip balm. Meaningless trinkets in this harsh realm. Then, a memory flared, vivid and insistent. The arcane tome. The instrument of her arrival. It had overflowed with strange glyphs, baffling diagrams, and a palpable aura of power. She had dismissed it as a curious artifact then, but now it seemed like her solitary hope. Where was it, though? She recalled it only from that first disorienting day in Egypt, when a passing peddler displayed it, and Hori had bartered a few copper coins for it. Her pulse quickened. Hori, the eager boy, hungry for knowledge, the one not cowed by her presence after the incident with the cat. He might know its whereabouts. Hope, tentative yet persistent, blossomed in her chest. She would locate Hori. She would recover the book. Long shadows stretched as Lily navigated towards Hori's family's workshop. The air had cooled, but the day's heat still radiated from the stone and clay. The fragrance of cedar and beeswax, usually a balm, now sharpened her anxiety. The workshop was a cramped, overflowing space, crowded with unfinished carvings, tools of every description, and the tang of sawdust. Hori's father, a stout figure with work-worn hands, was absent. Instead, Hori cowered in a corner, eyes wide with trepidation. "Hori," Lily called softly, wary of alarming him. The boy started, his gaze flitting around the room before locking on her. Relief flickered across his face, quickly replaced by apprehension. "Lily," he breathed, barely a whisper. "What are you doing here? You shouldn't come near us." "I know," Lily admitted, her voice heavy with regret. "But I need your help. Remember that book? The one the merchant sold, the one you bought?" Hori nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on her. "Yes, but it's only a book." "It's more than that, Hori. I think it holds a key. Do you still have it?" The boy hesitated, his gaze darting nervously toward the workshop's depths. A sudden wind gust rattled the shutters, making Hori wince. "There was a storm," he mumbled, his voice trembling. And a scorpion. Father said it was an omen." "An omen of what?" Lily asked, her heart hammering. "That the gods are displeased," Hori whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "He said we must be careful. He has hidden the book." "Where, Hori? Where did he hide it?" Lily pressed, urgency tightening her voice. Hori gestured toward the shadowed recess of the workshop, behind a jumble of uncompleted statues. "Behind the Osiris. But you mustn't touch it. It brings ill fortune." Lily disregarded his warning, single-minded in her pursuit. She shifted the statues, her fingers scraping against cold, unyielding stone. Then she saw it. It wasn't the same book. This one was larger, encased in cracked leather, and adorned with elaborate carvings that seemed to pulse in the dim light. But the symbols resonated. They thrummed with the same peculiar energy she recalled from the first book, the one that had delivered her here. Could it be possible? Could this be another gateway? A way back home, back to the attic. The air in Hori's father's workshop was a heavy blanket of cedar and beeswax. A solitary sunbeam, a celestial spotlight, sliced through the murky interior, illuminating suspended dust motes and rows of meticulously arranged tools flanking nascent sculptures. Lily's pulse hammered a frantic tattoo against her ribs, shattering the heavy stillness. She swallowed, her mouth parched. "Are you sure this is it?" she rasped, her voice barely audible. Hori, his features creased with anxiety, affirmed with a nod. Father kept it hidden, claimed it resonated differently, possessed more potency than the previous scroll. He darted furtive glances toward the entry, as if anticipating his father's spectral return to pull them away. On a small, carved table lay the book, its papyrus cover aged and discolored. Unlike the prior offering, this one thrummed with a subtle, almost intangible warmth. The hieroglyphs seemed to twist and churn within the dimness, luring her, promising secrets. It bore no resemblance to a gateway. It appeared something better left undisturbed. Doubt festered within her. Was this a monumental error? Could this be a dead end? Worse than the ostracism, the ravenous hunger, the soul-crushing fatigue of existing in a world that rejected her? The specter of her former life galvanized her resolve. She had to take the chance. "Step back," she commanded Hori, her voice shaky despite her efforts. He obeyed instantly, his eyes wide, reflecting a blend of trepidation and intrigue. Lily extended her hand, her fingers hovering above the coarse papyrus. She hesitated, a torrent of thoughts racing through her mind. Her family, her companions, the comforting normalcy of her time. Were they still there? Would they even recognize the changed person she had become? Inhaling deeply, she shut her eyes and pressed her palm against the book. A jolt of raw energy, a searing electrical surge, ripped through her, eliciting a gasp. The room swam before her eyes. The aroma of cedar and beeswax amplified, then fractured into a bizarre olfactory assault. Ozone, scorched metal, something immemorial and alien beyond description. She squeezed her eyelids shut, bracing for the unknown. The heat intensified to an unbearable degree. A low drone filled her ears, climbing in frequency until it became a deafening shriek. Then came light, a blinding, all-consuming radiance, so intense it felt like it was vaporizing her very essence. She cried out, a soundless scream devoured by the vortex. And then, oblivion, silence reigned. Darkness enveloped her. Then, gradually, fragments of sound seeped back. The distant growl of traffic, the trilling of crickets, the gentle whisper of leaves. Lily's eyes flickered open. She lay supine, gazing at the familiar slanted ceiling of her attic sanctuary. Dust motes pirouette in the moonlight filtering through the grimy window pane. The reek of aged wood and forgotten treasures permeated the space. Her attic, home at last. She pushed herself upright, her muscles aching, her skull throbbing. The papyrus book had vanished. Her hands trembled as she reached out, her fingers tracing the familiar texture of the dusty floorboards, a wave of relief washing over her. She scrambled to her feet, her limbs shaky and unsteady. She stumbled toward the window and peered out. Streetlights cast elongated shadows upon the peaceful suburban road. A vehicle passed, its beams momentarily illuminating manicured lawns and well-pruned shrubbery. Modernity, sanity restored. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass, tears stinging her eyes. It was real. She had returned, but she was irrevocably altered. The naive girl who had confidently strode through a time warp, convinced she could navigate ancient Egypt with her contemporary sensibilities, was gone forever. In her stead stood someone who had witnessed the stark realities of a world dictated by alien laws, foreign beliefs, and forgotten deities. Someone who had endured the sting of rejection, the relentless hunger of survival, the soul-deep exhaustion of trying to assimilate. She had failed to comprehend. She had failed to show respect. And the consequence had been profound. A surge of contrition flooded her as she recalled the cat, its terrified hiss, the villagers' horrified expressions. She had been so swift to pass judgment, so certain of her own superiority. Now, standing in the secure embrace of her attic, her perspective shifted. The ancient Egyptians weren't mere figures confined within the pages of history. They were tangible beings, possessed of their own intricate culture and traditions. And she had been a clumsy, arrogant interloper in their world. She drew back from the window, her gaze sweeping across the attic, taking in the time-worn furniture, the piles of forgotten books, the neglected toys. This was her world, her realm, and she felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude to be back. But she couldn't simply erase her past experience. She couldn't feign oblivion. She needed to learn from her ordeal. She needed to truly understand. Her journey would begin by reading, immersing herself, not skimming, in the history, the art, the religion of ancient Egypt. She would cultivate an appreciation for their cultural wisdom, the beauty of their artwork, the profundity of their faith. She wouldn't return to the past. That much was undeniable. The risks were too enormous. The potential for damage insurmountable. But she could still learn. She could still come to an understanding. And perhaps, in some way, she could find a measure of atonement for her trespasses even across the immeasurable gulf of time. Lily moved toward the creaky staircase leading to her room below, a nascent sense of purpose taking root. The trek home had been harrowing, but it had also served as a crucible, forging a new version of herself. She was back, transformed, and she recognized, with a certainty that resonated deep within her soul, that she had a monumental task ahead.